Hi, welcome back to Making Action Happen. I'm Sara Blackhurst.
And I'm Brian McCain.
And we are sitting here with Senator Michael Bennet. We're so excited to have you here with us today, Senator. We appreciate you being here. Action 22 really judges our legislators on the ones who show not just by word, but also by deed, that they're interested in taking care of and representing and serving our constituents. And so right now, we have certainly felt the love from you, taking care of all of us, looking out for us, asking questions, what we need, and taking what you've learned, especially in the last year, taking what you've learned from us and being able to apply it back in DC. We know it, we love it, and we appreciate it so much.
Well, I'm just grateful to be here in your studio for this conversation. And it's COVID. This has been a tough time, and I tell people, the elected leaders, local elected leaders, nobody runs for county commissioner or for mayor because they think they're going to be dealing with this. And my job is to support them, and to support obviously all of our constituents across the state, whether it's fire or flood or COVID. And for me, I've actually been to every one of our 64 counties in Colorado during COVID from February to February to try to hear what people need, from farmers and ranchers to small business owners. I was just meeting up in the Springs with a group of classroom teachers who are having a really tough time because they're sort of half back and half not back, and some of it's virtual and some of it's and everybody's so worried that the kids have fallen behind. So we've got a lot to do.
We have a lot to do. So let's talk about some of the things that you actually have been working on. So let's start with the American Rescue Plan. There's a couple of portions of that you've worked particularly hard on. So talk about a little bit the child tax credit.
So this is something, as I've traveled Colorado, obviously you hear lots of things in different places, but if somebody said to me, Michael, summarize the last 10 years of town halls, I would say that's really easy to do. It's people coming and saying, we're working really hard, but we can't afford some combination of housing, healthcare, higher education, or early childhood education, or childcare. We can't save. We feel like we're already living a life that's more diminished than the ones our parents lived, and we're worried about what's going to happen to our kids. So I wrote this bill to reform the child tax credit. The result of it's going to be a very large tax cut for working people across the country. It's going to cut childhood poverty in this country in half this year, almost in half.
How's it going to do that?
The existing child tax credit today is $2,000 a kid. This takes it up to $3,000 a kid, and it's fully refundable. And what that means is the poorest people are going to be able to get it. Today in Colorado, there are 350,000 children, a lot of them rural, who don't get the benefit of the tax credit because their parents don't make enough. Well, we've learned a lot in the last decades that we've made it awfully hard. It's hard. We made it really tough to be poor in this country. And it's tough we've made it hard for people to hold on to jobs because if they need childcare, they can't afford it. If the car breaks down, they can't get back to work. And what this says is, look, America's going to invest in our children. We're not going to accept the fact that we've got one of the highest, which we do, highest child poverty rates in all the industrialized countries in the world. So this cuts it almost in half by doing that.
Okay.
Additionally, we're working with the Treasury to try to make sure that it's paid out on a monthly basis, so it won't be annual anymore, which means that people are going to be able to predictably cash flow their kids and grandkids. So this is, Washington spent a lot of time over the years cutting taxes for the richest people in the country. We haven't cut taxes for working people in a really long time. 90% of the kids in Colorado are going to benefit from this. And so that's a big step forward. And that was in the American Rescue Plan.
All right. So Health Force, tell me about Health Force. That's interesting.
That idea came to me because I was traveling mostly in rural Colorado, and people were saying, we don't have the capacity to do vaccinations. We don't have people trained to do the testing and the tracing and the contact tracing. And Colorado, actually, our public health infrastructure, some estimates say, was underfunded by 40%. That was before COVID. Now they're totally stretched. And so I went back and wrote a bill to create something called the health force. And Joe Biden included that in the American Rescue Plan. What that's going to mean is we're going to spend $7 billion to hire 100,000 people across the country to support the local health infrastructure. So it is not a program from Washington, D.C. It is a program to give resources to people, public health folks across our state, who are now going to have people that they're going to be able to send out to do the vaccines and everything else. Why is that important? Because our economy is only going to be able to reopen and stay open if we get this virus behind us. And my view, I've said all along, we can either manage the virus or let the virus manage us. I'd much rather have us manage the virus, and that's what this is an attempt to do.
All right. Summer programs for kids.
So I used to be a school superintendent, as you guys probably know. So I've spent a lot of time talking to teachers, as I mentioned earlier, just today I was with some teachers, kids, parents, and a lot of our kids have fallen behind this year, and they need help in the summertime to get them caught up. And so there's about $1.2 billion in this package for summer programs, and they're distinct. The school districts are already getting a fair amount of money from the package. What I did was carve off just a little bit of that $1 billion for programs that are not school district programs. Having been a school superintendent, I know there are going to be places where it would be better to have some local, nonprofit or somebody like that delivering the programming, or sports, group or something like that. So that's what this money is for. And it's to give our kids a chance, to have a normal summer after they've had just a brutal school year. I don't know if you guys have kids. My youngest one, I've got 3. My youngest is 16. And, this has not been easy for anybody.
So my husband's a teacher, and we have identical twin boys who are 14.
14.
And it's been, I can say genuinely, it's been hard on the boys, but it's been far, far harder on my husband.
Mm-hmm.
This last year, it's been far, far harder on the teachers.
Yeah.
And he's seriously looking at early retirement or getting out at this point.
What does he teach?
He teaches science. He teaches biology high school.
I'm really worried about it. Before COVID even happened, I was in Jackson County, and I started off the conversation, which is where Walden is, up in northern Colorado. I started the conversation by apologizing for how badly I had done in the last election in Jackson County. And that's how Republican a place it is. And somebody said, "Oh no, Senator, you won more votes than you should have won." And somebody else said it was the school people. But they were telling me they've got one school up there. They're saying we can't hire teachers. Yeah. And I said, "Why can't you?" And he said, "Because we're paying $31,000 for a starting salary here. In Wyoming, they get $42,000 to start." And that was before COVID. Now there are people that just had this brutal time. And, I've heard people say, "Oh, the teachers are being lazy. They just want to stay home." It's not true. They're killing themselves, and nobody would have asked for this set of circumstances.
Not only are they killing themselves, but they're beating themselves up as well.
That's true.
They just feel like they've done such a bad job that they can't, and everything switches, and there's no way to connect. And especially in these small schools where these rural schools where everybody really knows everybody else, it's particularly hard to see, kids slip through the cracks, kids drop out, kids not showing up online. It's been really tough. So I hope those summer programs can really help connect teachers and kids and get that back to where that needs to be.
Also, I just wanted to ask too, I know earmarks are kind of the talk of the town right now. And we've had various members just ask, is there going to be a process? I know the Senate's still looking at how to go about it.
Yep.
But we have a lot of interest in rural Colorado to get some of these funds, like the Fox Theater in Trinidad. Commissioner Ortiz has a project here that he's curious about. Do you see that going through?
First of all, the Fox Theater in Trinidad, that would be an amazing project. That would be incredible. I just walked by there a few months ago. That would be amazing. And, and something like the Arkansas Valley Conduit that I've been working on with Corey Gardner and Mark Udall, actually, even before that, and now John Hickenlooper, that's something that could really benefit if we brought back earmarks or congressionally directed funding or whatever the word is. The Senate hasn't decided how to do it yet, as you said. I think, I'm going to be fine with it as long as it's completely transparent and everybody knows what my process is. I don't have a process yet, but so that it's fair all across the state, and that it's transparent when we actually get the earmarks, so people know what we've asked for and what we've given, so the public can evaluate whether they think that it's a good idea or not.
I appreciate that.
I think that ought to work, and it is true that there are things like the Arkansas Valley Conduit. It's actually a very good example that it's been harder to get done what we need to get done there because there hasn't been a kind of an earmark process.
Yeah, I remember every year fighting for that, writing letters, constantly.
So I'm curious, and a lot of earmarks kind of in the more conservative camps, earmarks get a bad rep. Can you explain a little bit why that you're even considering it, or what's the deal? What do people not understand about earmarks?
I think there are a couple of things. One is there is a feeling that sometimes members of Congress know their states better than bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And I think that's almost always true. And that having a very, very small portion of the budget be placed somewhere where Congress can direct it would mean that things like the Fox Theater in Trinidad, which nobody in Washington is going to know anything about, could actually get some attention. So that's one of it. Second, there is the feeling among some that this might actually help us begin to get people to work together again back in Washington. I don't know whether that's actually true or not, but at this point, I would try almost anything to try to get folks to. So you'll remember the abuse of earmarks, and we're just going to have to. That was really caused by a lack of transparency.
Yes, and that's important that they put that in. And when I read that, I was like, I wish this would have been how it used to be.
Right. So we'll see. We'll see. I think there's interest in trying to give it a try and see if it works.
How far out are they on making those rules?
I think it's I think we're probably going to figure this out in the next month or two. Appropriators are the ones that are really in the middle of it.
Gotcha. We have one of our members, Roxy Piganelli, who's been talking with your staff, but she had a big question about the way education is funding and you're using the Title I model. And her question was, is there any way to put that back, basically sort of like the earmark question, back in your hands so that you understand a little bit better what needs to happen in Colorado, especially on the education funding part, than somebody in DC who's just putting that into a model that already exists that's not really true to form here in Colorado.
Yeah. So when I was the superintendent of Denver Public Schools, I spent a lot of time wondering why everybody in Washington was so mean to our kids and to our teachers. And when I went back there, I realized they're not actually mean. Some of them are very mean, but they're not mean to our kids and our teachers. They just have absolutely no idea what's going on in our schools and our classroom. I am a big believer in flexibility of allowing decision-making to be made at the local level. I don't think Washington should be the national school board. I do think when it comes to Title I, we have been, as a nation, this is not Colorado specific, as a nation, we have never actually gotten the money to the poorest kids because it's based on a formula that has to do with average teacher salary instead of actual teacher salary. And that's something I've actually been fighting to change. And we've got, in the last Elementary and Secondary School Act bill, we got a study put in there to at least determine whether we're complying with the original intent of the law. And that's just that one piece on Title I. I do think, if there are educators listening or others listening who have thought of good ways of creating more flexibility, I'm all ears, and you should let me know.
Perfect, perfect. If you have enough time, can we talk about some of the infrastructure
Sure,
investment stuff?
sure.
Okay. Outdoor Restoration Partnership Act.
So this is really exciting to me. That is everybody knows we had our worst fire season ever. We had 3 of the worst fires that we have ever had. That's a result of climate, and it's a result of the federal government not investing in our national forests, not taking care of our national forests. For 11 years, I've been in this job, and I've heard about this everywhere. They said, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming.
Mhm.
Well, it did. Last year it came. And we are spending a fortune fighting fires, but we're spending nothing to try to mitigate the likelihood of there being a fire. And we're spending very little to protect the watersheds that are so vital to our farmers and ranchers in Colorado and across the Rocky Mountain West. So I wrote a bill called the Outdoor Restoration Act. I said, look, we spent over 3 or 4 years, we spent $50 billion fighting these fires. Let's put $60 billion in to do the mitigation and the watershed protection. It's going to give our farmers and ranchers some peace of mind, at least, that we're trying to do something on the front end. And the administration has included it in their infrastructure proposal.
Good.
Not to the same extent, not to the same size, but there will be, I think, billions of dollars available to do this work. My bill would have created 2 million jobs in the rural West, high-paying jobs in communities that need those jobs, and this will also help do that too. So that's in there.
Yeah.
And if I could mention one other thing,
Of course.
the broadband bill that we've talked about before, which would allow local governments, counties, and municipalities to build out broadband instead of just subsidizing the biggest telecom companies, which is what we've done historically. That language, which is my Bridge Act,
Right.
that's also in this infrastructure proposal from the Biden people, as is my rural infrastructure bill. For years, I've worked on the idea of how to streamline the federal government infrastructure grant programs so that they can become more accessible to rural places that don't have a ton of people to write grants, or
Right.
who might want to come together collaboratively and work in a regional way. That stuff's in here too.
We really appreciate that, especially this week, because we had applied for an EDA grant that was a regional development grant. And part of that was to hire grant writers and to do exactly what you're just talking about, because it is absolutely a problem. We didn't get that grant.
I heard about that.
Yeah, CSU Boulder got the grant. And it was
CU Boulder.
Or CU Boulder,
Yeah.
CU Boulder got the grant. And we were really surprised because it was a regional economic development grant. And nobody, nationwide, there were 44 grants given. And more than 30 of those grants were given to universities or colleges. Very few were given, I think a couple to economic development groups, but it was interesting to me that, bless you.
Excuse me.
It was interesting to me that is, it was an EDA grant and it was a regional economic development RFP, and CU Boulder got it for Colorado. So it'll be interesting to see, because you know it and you've been in it, you've described it, how that could be better applied.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know whether it's going to be interesting to see whether we can pass this infrastructure bill. There's
Right.
a lot that has to get done between now and then. But I think there's a feeling in rural America that Washington has just abandoned rural America, and the Biden administration has a lot to prove in terms of trying to unify the country.
Yeah.
And I think they've got a very strong incentive, and I hope they'll follow up on it to try to connect with rural America by putting in the kind of initiatives that I talk about. And that's why I'm so involved in that stuff. I mean, I don't want to accept that this polarization is a permanent fact of our democracy, because our democracy won't survive.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of farmers and ranchers that are downstream from those watersheds that might never vote for me for whatever reason. I totally understand that. I get that. But if I can do something useful for them, maybe in a small way, it'll help bring us back together.
Well, I think we're being signaled that we got to let you go. So again, being the good former congressional
I
staffer,
know,
have
Brian,
a lot
you're
of-
always the best. You're the best.
So,
Well, Sarah, thank you.
Thank
Brian,
you
thank
so
you. I
much.
really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I hope you'll give me the chance to come back.
oh, anytime
We
you
would
want
love
to.
it.
Okay.
And follow up, some of the stuff that we talked about last time you were with us was
Great.
here too. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
And your staff has always been great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
They're the
they're
best. Well,
wonderful.
as you
They're
know,
wonderful.
I mean, the senator is not the important person. The staff is the important
Yeah.
people. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the state legislation that is being introduced right now or has been introduced, and where Action 22 Board of Directors is on it and some of the concerns that we have there when we come right back. Hi, welcome back to Making Action Happen. I'm sitting here with Brian, and we just finished up with Senator Bennet. It's so great to have him here. I think last summer we were really blessed for him to increase his outreach to us. He sat down early on maybe April or May of last year and asked us to have our Action 22 members just do a roundtable discussion so he could get straight from their mouths, not filtered by anybody in DC, what was happening here and what were some of the concerns. Then he followed up with a couple of trips here. We went along on those. He's just been great.
Yeah, and it's really good. Like I've said before, post-election chaos where the incoming members and senators that are new, it takes a while for them to set up shop, get their operation going. So to have him in the area and engaged is awesome. And not a lot of places have that. I've been to states where they don't see their senators, they don't see their congressmen. And for us to even have him on the show twice in a few months, I mean, that's a big deal. And I really appreciate him coming in and talking to us.
Well, and his staff have worked so hard and really stepped up on casework and all of the things that go in that have to be covered during a transition. So
Yep.
new senator, new representatives, all those, the needs of constituents don't go away
Yep.
just because there's a transition going on, and they have been excellent. His office has been excellent in stepping up and making sure that everybody was taken care of during that 6 months or so
Yeah.
that was going on. So there's a couple of pieces of legislation on the state side that we want to talk about today. The first one is, it just was introduced. It's Senate Bill 200, and it is the reduce greenhouse gases and increase environmental justice. This bill is just, in spite of the name, it is a really destructive bill. And here's why. Well, let me go back and say, we put this out to the Action 22 board yesterday to vote. And I haven't seen them passionately and in unison oppose a bill like this. Usually they have something, they try to have something positive to say, but our board adamantly opposes this bill.
Yeah, and just to put this out there too, whenever we see legislation as an organization, Action 22, because we're nonpartisan, adamantly nonpartisan, this goes to the board, the members, whoever, and we get their input on whether or not to support or oppose legislation. So yesterday, you sent this out to the board, correct?
Yep.
And within 10 minutes, pretty much
Yes.
the response was there.
Well, the response was there, and it was beautifully articulated. I wanted to tell you, one of our board members, Ashley Valdez, wrote what her problem was with it. And we had a lot of them weigh in on what they thought. And we already had this process in place before COVID, because our board is, we can have up to 3 board members per county, per each of the 22 counties. And then we have 7 out of area board members. And so those, there's no way to get everybody together all the time to have these discussions. And so we've already had that online. But this is what she said. The state of Colorado is well on its way to exceeding its climate goals. With SB 21-200, the legislature passed the climate package in 2019, and that was SB 19-236. That created a pathway to ensure equity for low-income energy consumers and provide protections for workers and communities. This proposed bill would unwind all of the good work that was already accomplished. And I didn't think anybody explained it better than that. But what this bill does, in essence, all of the goals that were set, we've been working on this for a while. The state of Colorado has been working on this for a while, and everybody agrees that we want to be leaders in reducing emissions and doing climate and energy policy in a really productive and impactful way. Everybody in Colorado loves the environment, and we love what's going on here. But what's happened with this particular bill is they took all of the really hard work, all the huge concessions that energy companies had made in trying to reduce emissions. These goals that they set were already more aggressive than I thought was attainable or that anybody else. And then they went back and in 19, they looked at that and they said, what technology has been added and what can we do and how can we improve it? And they did that. Here's the frustrating part, I think, is that they did all that. And now in 21, the proponents of this bill and everybody who works with them said, oh, wait, that's not enough. You need to make it more, without any consideration of if that was feasible, if what the impact would be on consumers, what the impact would be on communities. We're talking millions and millions of tax dollars. For the folks here in Pueblo, we're talking, they wanted to change originally they were going to close down Comanche 3 in what, like, it was like
2070.
It was
I could be wrong.
2070. No, I think that's right. I think it was 2070. And then in 19, they said, we can do better, and we're going to do better, and we're going to close it down in 2040, which is huge. And they got a whole lot of pushback, and everybody in the community sort of freaked out, but they said, no, we can do this, and 2040 will give us plenty of time. This bill says, nope, you need to do it in 2030, if not sooner. So whatever they've done, whatever we've done as communities and businesses to try to meet those goals, they're basically saying it doesn't matter, whatever you do, it's not going to be good enough. And we don't care what carnage is laid in the process of us trying to push something that's completely unattainable.
Yeah, it reminds me of back in, basic training where it's like, all right, you're going to run 5 miles and it's at the beginning and then it kills you. And you're like, okay, that's done. They're like, oh, you can run 5 miles. We're going to make you run 5 more.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. We have one of our board members, our new board members, Garrison Ortiz, who is a county commissioner for Pueblo County, is particularly frustrated with this. And he's been watching this very closely.
Well, it impacts Pueblo financially. It severely impacts Pueblo financially.
So, and it's one of those things, and we've seen this over and over again. So all the planning that's done is not for tomorrow. It's for 3, 5, 10 years out. And so then when they do that and you get committed, whether it's a business or a community or a county, they have all of these obligations and they go out and they have it all set up. And now you're going to change the rules on them and completely devastate any work. And it's going to unwind. There's no way to meet those goals.
Yeah.
There's no way to do that. And just because everybody stepped up to do that, it feels punitive. Like we stepped up to do this. We said we're going to do this. We're very collaborative and all of that, but we're going to punish you for actually trying to do what we've asked you to do by, and this legislation is punitive, and we're seeing a lot of punitive legislation right now.
Yeah, give an inch, take a mile.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. So if it's not clear right now, the last 5 minutes of me kind of going off on this, Action 22 is adamantly opposed. There's nothing in the bill so far that we see that's salvageable. And there's nothing, as it is right now, we cannot in any way, shape, or form support this, but we have to actually adamantly oppose that bill, the reduce greenhouse gases and increase environmental justice. And even that phrasing, environmental justice, feels it's a slap in the face, especially knowing all the work that's gone in to try to do that and meet the goals and pivot and everything that they've had to do.
Which moves us along to the next bill.
Which is not dissimilar in our frustration with that. So the Ag Workers' Rights Bill. So you and I were in the San Luis Valley last week.
Yes.
I had never been out to Bob Mativi's place.
Yeah, I've been there a few times.
So Bob Mativi is a high-tech potato producer. And when I say a high-tech potato producer, I get a weird look. But this was really cool. I was so excited. I'm a little bit of an ag tech nerd. I am super excited to see, and the ag community never toots their own horn, but I was really excited to see when they've really brought the tech up to date in producing our food. It's super cool.
And to be fair, they all do. Ag is, a lot of people think that, running a farm, raising cattle, it's just throwing some seeds in the ground and driving over it with a tractor. But I think I've said it before on this show, the first time that I ever experienced the internet was on a farm in Kansas in 1995. The high school I went to did not even have good internet at the time. But my family out there, they had to have it. I remember going in my uncle's basement and he had the Doppler weather radar up, and then he had the internet, and then he was checking market prices and, using maps and data for planting crops. And farmers, ag producers have always been at the forefront of technology, and they will continue to do so, especially in this changing environment. And you say a high-tech potato farmer, but Bob Matiev's operation that we saw down there, it's everything from the seeds, cloning, to raising, to planting, to a way to harvest it, get it out the door, get it to the stores, get it to wherever it needs to go. And it's impressive.
It's so impressive. He has the potatoes. There's a little potato river that the potatoes go down so that they're gently moved from one place to another and they get cleaned. But that's not the high tech part. The high tech part is the way they sort and grade the potatoes. Mm-hmm. It's cameras. So the cameras take a 360-degree angle on each individual potato. Yep. And then it tells them what shoot to go on, what size it is, if there's any imperfections or anything that they need to go get rid of that potato or whatever. That was super cool. Robot arms that lift the potatoes and put them on the pallet. And nothing there that I saw indicated that the workers weren't treated anything but fantastically.
Yes.
That struck me.
And it does happen. Let's be fair.
Okay, we'll be fair.
It does happen. People do take advantage of their workers and maybe mistreat them, but 99.9% of the time you don't see that. And if an operation is treating their workers badly in any way, they'll leave. There's other places it's like, well, this guy, I think Bob even brought up, he said, like, we treat everybody great because if we don't, they're going to go over to the farm next to us.
Well, and here's the thing that's interesting to me. There's already rules in place that protect workers.
Yes.
They're federal rules. And even though some of those rules were opted out in Colorado, there's still a whole lot of rules that exist. But this bill, this ag worker bill it's fascinating to me. I keep asking you, where is this coming from? Because there's a portion of the bill that says how long the handle can be on the hoe or the whatever tool that they're using, that it can't be too long or too short, there's specifics on that. There's specifics, and we know from going and interviewing and seeing some of these ag producers, and especially after I saw Bob Mativi's place, those workers, they run the machinery. They run the cameras. They're not out there backbreaking work. The only thing that was really super physical was the guy maybe that was helping the potatoes get to the little potato river.
Yeah, but there is some harder labor in that,
sure,
going out and picking. And what's interesting about this, I forget the language, but it's like the band short handled hose. You know, this impacts, I think, the smaller farms like the organic, where you actually do have people out there picking by hand. We're talking, you know, a few acres. Somebody that can't afford, or an operation that can't afford all the automation, can't afford the equipment. You know, this would essentially say that you're going to have to go out there and dig potatoes, carrots, whatever, out with your hand.
Yeah. That I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I didn't understand how there's sort of, I don't understand where that one comes from. And to be fair, to be perfectly fair, the sponsor of the bill, Daniels, I haven't stopped and had a conversation with her. I haven't asked her, you know, and that's to be perfectly fair. I've just really gone out, because this was, I felt like this was very left field, knowing that, first of all, ag workers, they're looking for ag workers all the time.
Yeah.
Ag workers already, quite a few ag workers already make Colorado minimum wage or above Colorado minimum wage,
Which is higher than federal minimum
which is
wage.
higher than federal minimum wage. Federal minimum wage is like 7 something, and Colorado minimum wage is like 12 something.
Yeah.
And so they're already doing better here, and they're free to leave. There's nothing, there's no contracts, there's nothing like that. Ag workers can go from place to place. So I really have had a hard time understanding this.
Well, this is one where I'm not an expert on ag by any means. I know a little bit about it, but you default to the Action 22 members and the ag producers in Action 22. And I've honestly, you know, being in the Valley, talking to our members, even non-members, I haven't spoken with anybody that's come out in support of this bill or even parts of the bill.
Right.
You know, the thing we ask when we're doing this is like, you know, okay, so this bill's going to probably pass. It's going to go through. What would you like to see changed in it? What would you like added to it? What don't you like about it? What's a good thing you can find in it? And we've asked that question, like, can you identify any good parts of this bill that would affect you in a positive way? And I mean, I haven't really heard anything.
And most of the time on the state level, there's something, something, and they say, so you'll hear people say, I can't support the bill in its current form, meaning there's going to be some things that they want to change about it. And so the stakeholders come in and they say, if you can change this, then we can live with it. Or if you can change this, we can live with it. That absolutely has not happened on this bill. And again, I don't understand why. I went and drove around with one of our Action 22 members, who is Senator Cleve Simpson, and he's a new senator. I'm a big fan of his. But one of the things that I really like about him is he hasn't gone in there acting like he knows everything already. He's gone in there really to try to learn and understand the things that he doesn't know. His family's been a producer down there in the San Luis Valley for like 5 generations now. And I went and met his dad, and he drove us around, and they have 5 generations all living within the same little area. And so he went, and I know he's tried to reach out to really understand, is there something he's missing? I think that was the question he had. And he still can't answer the question, what am I missing that we don't already have? And there's a couple things that he's like, we could maybe improve, but he's looking to improve. And that's just the sort of legislator he is. He wants to improve. If there's really a problem, he wants to fix it. And again, we don't understand where this is coming from.
And my fear with this too is, with ag being the second largest economic driver in Colorado, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you don't want ag to go away. But what I see this, and again, this could be like my conspiracy tinfoil hat, is you have ag producers, farmers, ranchers that are barely making it. They're making it, and they will make it as is. But then you have something that comes in that impacts them, just like fees on a small business. Especially now, we're seeing some proposed fees and some rule changes that will impact small businesses. I don't think anybody in Colorado wants ag to go away, but what you're going to see is some of these operations, these producers, they'll say we can't do it anymore, and ironically, then you'll see the large, multi-million, huge national farming companies, ag companies come in and just take over, and they'll be like, okay, well, we can afford to do this. We can do this. So let's just buy everybody out. And my fear is that you'll have these generations of farmers, you know, in Colorado that it's like, it's too tough. I give up. I'm just going to sell everything. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't think it is.
I absolutely don't think it is. I have a deep affection for the ag community, and that's no secret. But I think one of the things about this bill that also bothers me is that it's very much attacking, or it's very much going after ag. I mean, that's the whole thing. The bill itself says ag. So why are they, and it's ag workers. So knowing that they have all of these regulations on them already, why is this would put them, it would not be a level playing field. It would put them at a huge disadvantage that I don't know. And I can't read I'm going to give Daniels the benefit of the doubt that that's not her intent, is to put it. I don't think that that's the intent at all, but those unintended consequences come into play.
And there might be another side of the story, to play devil's advocate. Maybe there's something that was seen, or maybe there is an issue that we're not aware of. But I mean, I haven't seen anything, but maybe it's out there. And I think that the proponents of this legislation need to do a better job about explaining where they're coming from and why. You know, another thing I've heard is that there hasn't been much engagement with the people that are opposed to this, with the people that are pushing it. And you need to have that engagement. We've heard it on the show before, that, you know, Republicans and Democrats need to talk to each other. And this is an example where one side's not listening to the other. And it works both ways. You know,
nobody's innocent in that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm not saying one's better than the other, but this is an issue when you're talking about one of the largest economic drivers in a state post-COVID, that everybody needs, like, we need money, we need our economy to rebound. And ag has been actually doing well during COVID. The ag has kept Colorado going. Ag is feeding our country. And it just seems there hasn't been that engagement to the ag community, at least in our region. And I could be wrong. And please, if I'm wrong,
let us know.
Email us at show@action22.org. We want to hear from you, because we're not hearing from that side of it, and we need to hear from that side.
For sure. I think one of the things that was a big takeaway for me with meeting with Bob Mativi is he took us in to where he kept talking about cutting, but what they do is they have a plant and they cut it and they cut it and they cut it, and they'll get thousands of plants from the one plant that starts. But it takes 3 years from the time they start with that sprout.
Which actually goes into the next point. You have, as Action 22 is aware, I think we sent an email out, we spoke about it, and we're going to speak about this in depth next week on our show, hopefully. You know, you have legislation through rulemaking. And when you have an operation that has to plan financially for 3 years out, and you have either legislation passing in the state that may increase fine or fees, taxes, and fines, or as what we're seeing, rulemaking, so changes to the rules of the state. So it doesn't even go through the legislative process,
right, that
is going to possibly impact operations financially. You know, they're planning from 3 years ago, again, pre-COVID. And so what they planned for in 2021, 2022 was way back in 2018. And then if all of a sudden we're dumped with all these new fees, taxes, what have you, that's going to hurt them. I plain and simple, that's going to cut into their revenue. And they understand that, and they've always dealt with it. It's, you know, something that's just there. But again, next week's show, we're going to talk about legislation through rulemaking.
And when we're talking about everybody is giving lip service to economic recovery, but legislation, or not legislation, governing through rulemaking, is exactly in contradiction to that philosophy that we're all trying to get everybody back on their feet, and to do this in a productive way, number one. But number two, the other thing that really bothers me about some of these things is, can we not make any rule changes or any changes that we're trying to make, can we make them incentivized instead of punitive?
Yes.
We're absolutely capable of that, but that's not the approach that some of these, like these two bills, are not taking that approach. There's no incentive, there's no support, there's no, here, if we do it this way, we're going to reward you. It's a punitive way of doing things, and it bugs me.
It's negative reinforcement. So positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement really doesn't work. Not in humans, not in animals. You know, you can't train your dog by beating it. You can't mold a human by punishing him or her. Going back to, I guess, you know, the military has a different idea about that, but in everything else, that's not how it works. It's, you know, the honey vinegar.
Yeah.
Thing.
What's going to be the most, it's going to work maybe the first or second time, but in long-term sustainability, punitive reinforcement never works to change minds or hearts. It never works to get any kind of long-term effective change to happen. So those are the other two. There's several other things going on. We've had lots of discussions in the last couple of weeks. It's been super busy. In the last few minutes, what else has been, as I have a couple things as members are reaching out, but what's been your conversations have been like?
You know, I've just been, right now I'm going to solely concentrate on recruiting people for Action 22. We need members. We need your help right now. Our voice is our members, and we need more members to have a louder voice. Luckily, we do have a good relationship with our legislators, federal and local. We do have that line to the governor, and he engages us. But the more people we have in our voice, the louder we are. And maybe that can help educate some of the people that aren't rural Coloradoans when they're making these decisions, changing these rules, you know, open up their eyes to how it impacts us. And I've said it before on the show, like we need to be together in this because the world's crazy right now. And, you know, we're still in a pandemic, and not to disparage our politicians and our legislators, but this is a time where they can get things done that traditionally they can't get done. And we need to make sure the changes that they're making and implementing that impact our area, they're heard. And so I think that's it. We need your help.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quick example of that. We had, yesterday I had a great conversation with CDOT, and in particular, Sarah Hughes was on that call, and a couple other people were on that call to talk about the governor's transportation funding proposal. And I had a lot of questions, and you know me well, I like to ask questions until I get the answer, until I understand something. And they said on the phone, we're going to do a follow-up transportation sort of a mini summit like we did with energy. We're going to do that on the 23rd of this month, because there's a whole lot of questions before that language is introduced as to what's going on. Because there's a lot of questions surrounding, so we've got the state stimulus that they worked on, that our legislators worked really hard on. There is the transportation proposal, and then we have all of the stimulus money coming in. And at one point I kept asking if we're going to do this, if transportation and if we're going to try to fund it, you know, internally, but we're getting stimulus dollars in, why do we need to do that if we're getting all the stimulus money? And I think the thing that we need to remember is, like you just said, right now is really the time to put things together in a productive way. The federal stimulus is one-time dollars. It's not for programs. That's not the intent of it. But if we can do that and catch up, and then put these projects, the things that are most important and highest priority to us, in place so that it's sustainable after the stimulus helps us catch up. So if we think about it in that way, I think we can be more productive in sort of analyzing it and being critical, but being productively critical of some of those things. And it was a great conversation, but I really hadn't thought about it in that way before, how the stimulus dollars from the federal stimulus dollars can be used to catch up on things, and then Colorado, it's back on Colorado to keep those things sustainable. So that was productive. So we'll keep everybody posted on how they can get in on that conversation. We have a lot of county commissioners that we have visited with, and a lot of them are, we have a lot of new county commissioners, and they're all wondering how all that is going to work. The other thing that we are beginning to hammer out, the Building Back Better Colorado is a project out of the governor's office, and they're doing a series of listening sessions. And those listening sessions are to really understand what specific priorities are. We all know what the big five are: education, fire mitigation, transportation. Those are all the big five, but specifically what they're going to do so that when those stimulus dollars come in, they can figure out their process for getting those to the counties and what needs to happen first and what needs to happen second. So sort of prioritizing that as soon as they have made those decisions. But I think what I'm hearing, and we've had this confirmed in a couple of places, is that a lot of that's going to go through DOLA. And DOLA, of course, is unique to Colorado. Other states don't have that, but DOLA will be the one that are sort of doing that. As you were explaining earlier, it's sort of how to put the money where, and then it's going to play a big role in that as well. So there's going to be some interesting things coming up, and it'll be great. So that's all we have for today. Hey, Chad Forthman, I know you're listening. So remember that time you ran a ballot initiative and everybody was kind of mad at you about it? How about you run now one that will really make the people who are introducing pause really, really mad. So join us next week when I ask a lot of overcomplicated questions, and Brian McCain explains to us how growing up in Pueblo, Colorado gave him the unique skills that he needed to run security on a sweat lodge at a nunnery in an undisclosed location of Ukraine. We'll be back next week to talk about those and all the other crazy things happening in Colorado. See you then.